It was supposed to be the kind of day you don't forget. I had ironed my gown the night before, laid out my chords, triple-checked my speech for the scholarship award I'd be receiving, not that anyone had asked to read it. I woke up early that morning, more nervous than excited. Somewhere deep inside, I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. That they'd come. They knew what time the ceremony started. I'd sent it twice, once in the group chat, once individually. I even offered to print the parking passes and mail them myself. My dad gave me a thumbs-up emoji. My mom said, "We'll see you there, sweetheart." My brother never replied. He never did. I walked into the auditorium with a stomach full of nerves and a phone full of silence. No missed calls. No texts like "we're on our way." I sat with the other graduates, glancing behind me every few minutes, scanning the crowd. Just rows and rows of families, clapping, smiling, beaming. I saw a woman with a bouquet so big it blocked the view of 3 people behind her. I saw a dad cry into his sleeve when his daughter's name was called. A little boy holding up a neon sign that read "Go Auntie." When they called my name, I stood. I smiled for the camera. I shook the dean's hand, accepted the folder, nodded at the flash. Then I walked back to my seat to the sound of generic clapping and the dull ache of an empty front row. Afterward, the graduates spilled out into the courtyard, hugging family, posing for pictures, holding flowers and balloons. I stood off to the side, clutching my folder, trying not to let my face show what my heart was doing. Still no text. Still no call. Finally, I opened Instagram. And there it was. A story from my brother, posted 2 hours ago, a video of their backyard decorated in blue and gold streamers, dog-themed cupcakes on a table, a golden retriever wearing a tiny paper crown while everyone sang happy birthday. My mom was in the background holding a sparkler. My dad was setting up a kiddie pool. Someone was pouring champagne. The caption read, "Happy 5th to our golden boy, Max. Party popper paw prints #family first." I stared at it for a long time. I watched it again. Then again. There was a moment in the second video, right after the dog tries to bite the candle, when I saw my mom laugh and say, "I can't believe we almost skipped this." Almost. She said almost. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in the crowd of people holding flowers they didn't have to buy themselves. I just sat down on a bench, took a breath, and watched the sun catch the gold lettering on my diploma cover. They chose the dog. They chose the dog. I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because if I didn't, I'd start crying and never stop. I texted one person that day, my old roommate, who met me for coffee an hour later. She hugged me without asking questions and told me she was proud. That hug meant more than anything my family could have said. That night, I got a message in the group chat. A photo of Max wearing sunglasses with a party hat. Best birthday ever. No mention of the ceremony. No congratulations. Just that stupid crown. That was the moment something in me clicked shut. Not out of rage. Not even sadness anymore. Just clarity. They had drawn their line. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like trying to cross it. This wasn't the first time they forgot me. It was just the first time they'd done it with balloons and matching t-shirts. When I was 6, they missed my school play because my brother's soccer team made it to regionals. He didn't even play, he sat on the bench the whole time. When I was 11, they skipped my piano recital because the dog had a vet appointment. I remember them calling the instructor to apologize, not to me. I told myself they were just busy. That it didn't mean anything. That next time would be different. Next time never came. I think the truth was always there. I just kept dressing it up in excuses so it wouldn't sting so much. My brother was always the center. Not just of attention, but of gravity. Every decision orbited around his schedule, his moods, his needs. And once Max entered the picture, the golden boy, the family mascot, he became the crown jewel of that orbit. His birthday got more decorations than mine. His Instagram page had more followers than I did. My mom once joked that Max was her real baby. I laughed along with everyone else. But on graduation day, the joke wore out. I confronted my mom 3 days later. Not with yelling. Just questions. Did you forget what day it was? She looked up from her phone and blinked. What do you mean? My graduation. A pause. Oh, she said. We thought it would be too crowded. And we already had everything set up here. You know how hard it is to reschedule a dog bakery? I just stared at her. We figured you'd understand, she added. You're so independent. You never need a big fuss. That part hit harder than I expected. Because it was true. I had stopped asking for much a long time ago. I learned early that disappointment shrinks faster when you expect less. I never demanded the spotlight. I never threw tantrums or begged for gifts. I did what they always said they wanted. I kept my head down, got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and clapped for my brother at every game. But the truth is, I did want a big fuss. Just once. I wanted to walk across that stage and see their faces in the crowd. I wanted flowers, and cheers, and maybe even a sign that said, "We're proud of you." I wanted to feel like I wasn't just part of the family tree, but a branch that mattered. Instead, they gave the dog a themed cake. Later that night, my dad texted me, "Heard you were upset. Don't be. You know we love you. Let's do lunch next week." Lunch. As if that was the currency love could be paid in. I didn't reply. I turned my phone off and opened my laptop. I pulled up my resume, clicked through job boards, and started applying. I'd always dreamed of moving to the city, but I told myself I should stay nearby, in case they needed me. In case my presence mattered. But that night, I realized something else. They didn't need me. And I didn't need to keep auditioning for a role they had no intention of casting me in. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about choosing to put myself at the center, for once, and seeing what happened when I stopped orbiting people who never looked up to see me. Something changes when you stop explaining yourself to people who never really listened. The days after the conversation with my mom felt strange, not dramatic, just stripped down. The silence between us didn't feel like a fight. It felt like clarity. Like I had finally stopped trying to translate my disappointment into a language they understood. Because the truth was, they didn't speak guilt. Not fluently. Maybe they never had. They thought of me as the strong one. That's what they always said. When they forgot a birthday, when they missed a meet, when they ran late or canceled plans, she'll understand. She always does. I became a convenience. Not a daughter. A placeholder for responsibility they didn't want to feel. So I decided to become something else. I stopped answering the family group chat. At first, it was hard, the pings still came in like clockwork. Max in a new costume. My brother making avocado toast like it was a world event. My parents sharing old photos from their honeymoon with captions like #TBT to when life was simple. Not once did they mention the graduation they skipped. Not once did they ask how my job search was going. So I stopped replying altogether. I left the read receipts on. That part felt petty at first, but after a while, it became something else, a quiet record of all the times they sent pictures and jokes instead of apologies. I put my energy into building a future that didn't rely on their validation. I applied to jobs in cities far from theirs. I reworked my portfolio. I polished my LinkedIn, joined 2 online groups for women in tech, and finally emailed that mentor I'd been too afraid to contact. And then I got an offer. It wasn't just good, it was ideal. A mid-sized firm in Chicago. A relocation bonus. A manager who spoke to me like a peer, not a favor. When I told her my story in the interview, not the dog part, just the drive to make something of myself without the usual cheerleaders, she smiled and said, "Sounds like you've been doing this alone for a while. Let's not let that continue." I wanted to cry. But instead, I just nodded and said, "I'm ready." I didn't tell my family. Not yet. Instead, I threw myself a dinner. Nothing flashy. Just close friends, some extended cousins, and a few professors who had always shown up when it mattered. I rented the back room of a cafe downtown. I paid for the food. I made a short toast that ended with, "Thank you for being the people who stood in the places others were supposed to." They clapped. They hugged me. They told me they were proud. My parents weren't there. My brother wasn't there. Max wasn't there. But the room still felt full. Later that night, I posted one picture. Just me holding a glass of champagne, diploma in one hand, cake in the background. The caption was short, "For everyone who shows up, thank you." I left it at that. No tags. No drama. Just truth. The next morning, I woke up to a missed call from my dad. A text from my mom, "Was that last night?" And from my brother, "You could have told us." But the thing is, I did. I've been telling them for years. They just thought the dog was louder. I never expected them to understand. But I did expect them to notice. When the dinner photos went up and the congratulations rolled in from people who had no obligation to care, old classmates, professors, my roommate's mom, I waited to see if my parents would reach out in some way that felt human. Not defensive. Not performative. Just human. Instead, they gave me guilt wrapped in confusion. "Why wouldn't you invite us? We're family." This is getting childish. They never asked how the job hunt was going. Never asked what that dinner meant to me. Never once used the word sorry. But they wanted to know why they weren't included in the moment I built without them. It was simple. You don't get to stand in the photo if you skipped the frame. That week, I signed the job offer. I reread the email 3 times just to feel the words settle. "We're excited to welcome you to the team. Let us know how we can support your move." Support. A word my family had only ever used when talking about the dog's joints. I didn't reply to their texts. I didn't owe them a conversation. Instead, I sent a thank you card to my mentor, packed the first few boxes, and scheduled the movers. I booked a one-way flight to Chicago and a temporary Airbnb with warm lighting and exposed brick. I chose it for the light, something my old bedroom never really had. 1 week before the move, I made a final post. It was just a photo of my new apartment key in my hand. The caption read, "Graduated. Employed. Gone. No location. No explanation." They called. I didn't answer. They left voicemails. Confused, hurt, trying to spin a new narrative. "You should have told us you were moving. We could have helped. Is this about Max's birthday? You're really still upset about that?" Yes. And no. Yes, I was still upset about the day they skipped. But it wasn't just the day. It was the 10,000 little moments that came before it. It was every time they chose convenience over care. Every time they assumed I'd understand, I'd wait, I'd excuse. They thought love was a background character, always there, always silent, never needing a scene. But I needed one. And they missed it. My roommate helped me load the last of my things into the rental car. I handed her the keys to my old place and hugged her tighter than I expected. She whispered, "They'll realize what they lost." I smiled, but I wasn't waiting for that anymore. The plane ride felt light. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because I was finally grieving on my own terms. I stared out the window and watched the clouds fold like pages. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was turning one. When I landed, I texted one person, my mentor. I'm here. Thank you for believing in me before I did. I unpacked in silence that night. No welcome committee. No dog with a bow. Just me, my degree, my key, and my choice. And when I finally lay in bed, phone face down, I breathed deeper than I had in years. They had a party. I had a future. They celebrated a dog. I built a door. And then I closed it, not out of bitterness, but because I finally realized I was never going to be invited to their world. So I made my own. The first time they realized I was serious wasn't when I stopped calling. It wasn't when I moved across the country. It wasn't even when I left the group chat. It was when I didn't come home for Thanksgiving. My mom texted a week before, "Let us know what you want us to bring to the airport." I hadn't booked a flight. I hadn't even checked ticket prices. I replied, "I'll be staying here." Got plans. She sent back a thumbs up emoji. Then 3 hours later, another message, "Really? You're not coming at all?" No, I wasn't. The last holiday I spent with them, I brought my laptop to the dinner table because I had a final exam due the next morning. My dad made a joke about how I couldn't even pause for turkey, and my brother kept asking if I was actually graduating with a real degree or just Google certificates. They all laughed. I did too, because what else could I do? This year, I made turkey in my tiny oven and invited 3 friends over, people I'd met at work, one of whom had also left a complicated family behind in another state. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I said, "Distance." And finally learning I'm allowed to make my own table. They didn't ask for context. They just raised their glasses. My brother called me the next day. First time in months. I let it ring out. He left a voicemail. "Hey, listen, I know you're mad." I told them it was messed up. I just didn't want to get in the middle. "But we missed you yesterday." Max kept looking at the door. I deleted the message before it finished. I was done competing with a dog for affection that was never unconditional to begin with. By Christmas, the tone had shifted. My parents sent a gift, a mug with my college logo on it, 3 months too late. There was no note. Just a label with my name misspelled. I left it in the box. They posted a photo of the dog wearing a Santa hat and captioned it, "Our favorite gift every year, Paw Prints Red Heart." I didn't comment. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't even care. I had stopped expecting them to change. One of my coworkers asked if it was hard being on my own during the holidays. I told her the truth. It's easier than pretending I'm welcome. A few weeks later, I threw a small dinner party for my promotion. I had just been made junior project lead on a campaign I built from scratch. We celebrated with candlelight and cheap wine and loud music that shook the floor. There were photos, not the kind that needed filters, just moments of joy frozen in time. I posted one. Me, standing in front of a chalkboard wall my friends had drawn on. Written behind me, in messy cursive, was the phrase, "She showed up, for herself." No caption. Just that. My parents didn't call. Not then. Not after. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Or maybe they still didn't realize what they had lost. That their silence had built something they couldn't break now. That the door they ignored was no longer just closed, it had been bricked over. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't asking for a seat at a table they built for someone else. Because I'd built one of my own, and this time, the only dog there was the kind that slept at my feet without ever once asking me to make myself smaller. It's funny how silence can stretch, not like an absence, but like a room you've grown into. At first, the distance felt unfamiliar. Lonely, even. But now? Now it feels like air. Real, breathable air. I didn't send a birthday message when Max turned 6. My mom posted the usual spread: balloons, a bone-shaped cake, a party hat tilted dramatically to one side. My brother stood next to him, holding up a sign that read, "You're the only graduate that matters." The caption said, "6 years of unconditional love. The best boy there ever was." It got 83 likes. I scrolled past it without flinching. That's how I knew I was free. By then, I had settled into the city. My apartment wasn't much, but it was mine. The kind of place where the light hit just right in the morning, and where the silence felt earned, not empty. My desk faced a window. My diploma hung above it, not because I needed to show it off, but because I'd promised myself I would frame it for me. Not for them. They reached out, once. It was spring. My dad called and left a voicemail. Said they were planning a family barbecue and wanted to clear the air. He used words like miscommunication, silly mistake, and let's move on. I played the message twice, waiting for one word: sorry. It never came. So I didn't reply. I didn't want an apology served cold after months of silence. I didn't want a seat at a picnic table where no one noticed I wasn't there. I didn't want a smile over burgers from people who had mistaken presents for love and excuses for effort. No, what I wanted was simpler. I wanted peace. And I had it now. I spent that weekend with friends, not as a replacement for family, but as proof that family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's where you're seen. Where you're chosen. Where people remember your milestones without being reminded. I brought a cake to that gathering. Not for me. For my coworker who just finished her thesis. It wasn't even that big of a deal to her, but I remembered. I remembered what it felt like to walk across a stage and find no one clapping. So I clapped loudly. I bought a cake that said, "You matter. We saw you." And when we cut it, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not grief. Not regret. Just release. People sometimes ask me if I'll ever make up with my family. If I think they'll change. If there's hope for reunion. And I always answer the same way. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm also not waiting at the door. Because they made their choices, big and small. Not just on graduation day, but on every day before that, when they looked past me and laughed. When they chose convenience over connection. A dog over their daughter. I'm sure Max is still the golden boy. That's fine. I don't need their spotlight anymore. I found my own. It doesn't flicker. It doesn't fade. It's not based on approval or attention or applause. It's just there, steady, quiet, mine. And for once, that's more than enough.